There's a moment in every trader's journey that nobody talks about. A shift that happens so quietly, you almost miss it. It's not when you first discover a strategy idea. It's not when you first get your winning trade. It's not even when your backtest results look incredibly impressive. It's something much smaller and much more invisible. But when it happens, you know something fundamentally has changed. Now I'm going to show you the 5 signs that you're actually building a profitable strategy in this video. And I need to warn you, none of these signs are what you expect. Most traders look for proof at the wrong places. They look at total returns. They look at the amount of winning trades they have. They compare the P&L to others, for example. And they miss the real signals. The signals that appear before you deploy with real capital. The signals that separate strategies that work from strategies that fail. Because building a profitable strategy isn't about one perfect backtest. It's about small technical details that compound into robustness. Details in how your equity curve behaves. Details in how parameters behave. And details in how performance holds up on unseen data. And if you're seeing one of these signs, your strategy is more likely to be profitable than you think, even if your backtest doesn't show the highest returns. So learn these signs and recognize them. And at the very least, knowing that you're building something real can give you the confidence to deploy it with actual capital, even when the results look a bit boring. So let's begin. The first sign you need to recognize is that your equity curve looks realistically imperfect. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I don't mean occasionally imperfect. I mean it has drawdowns, sideways periods, and volatility. Most traders see this and actually panic. They think, well, my equity curve isn't smooth, something must be wrong, I need to optimize this strategy. Well, actually, the opposite is true. If your equity curve looks like this, where it's just perfectly smooth going up to the right, it's almost like a shooting star or a straight line, this is a red flag for overfitting and it is not a sign of success. Here's why this matters. Well, real markets go through different regimes. You have trending periods, you have choppy periods, you have high volatility periods, you have low volatility periods. No strategy works perfectly in all of them. A realistic equity curve reflects this. You'll have periods where the strategy crushes it. You'll have periods where it goes sideways. This is normal and healthy. Beginner traders optimize their equity curves until they seem perfect. They tweak parameters until every drawdown is minimized, and they keep adjusting that line so that it can go up to the right as smoothly as possible. But what they've actually done is fit their strategy to historical noise. That perfect equity curve, it won't survive a single month, not even probably a couple of days in live trading, because the market will present conditions that maybe weren't in your backtest or that didn't fit that particular noise. Fundamentally, your over-optimized strategy will have no idea how to handle those periods. But what professional traders actually do is they look for imperfect equity curves. They want to see higher highs and higher lows over time. They want to see natural volatility in returns. They want to see drawdowns that do recover. And they'll want to see sideways periods that eventually break out. But all of those equity curves are going to contain components of those. It's not just a straight line to the right. Now, here's what I personally do for my own algorithms that I've tested and run. I've been trading for 6 years, and I now run a portfolio of about 10 plus automated strategies in futures, equities, and crypto. What I do personally is I run a Monte Carlo simulation on my strategy. This randomizes the order of trades and generates hundreds of possible equity curves, as you kind of saw more in the beginning of this video. Now, if my actual equity curve is in the top 2 to 5% of all simulated curves, that's going to be suspicious for me. It means that I probably got lucky with the trade sequencing of that particular backtest. And most likely, live trading isn't going to have that same sequence. The lesson here is if your equity curve looks too good to be true, it probably is. Embrace the mess, embrace the drawdowns, and embrace the volatility. That's what real strategies look like, and no strategy that actually works on the live market isn't going to have any of those. Now, number 2 is parameter sensitivity shows gradual performance changes. Now, this is just one example where we can see there's a local maxima and the local minima is over there. And overall, it's a very gradual decline. It's actually very, very smooth for the most part. And this is what you want to be seeing. This is probably one of the most important tests I actually run, and most traders completely skip it. In case you don't know what parameter sensitivity means, let's say you had a moving average crossover strategy. Your backtest shows performance with a 50-day moving average and a 200-day moving average. They look great and it has great performance. What happens when you test 49 and 199 or 51, 201? If performance falls off a cliff, you're probably overfit to that particular moving average on your historical data. That means your strategy only works with those parameters historically, most likely because of noise. And if you change them by just a bit and it completely fails, that is not edge and it's most likely just noise. What you want to see is a smooth region where performance is gradually getting worse from that kind of maximum. And you might be wondering, well, like, why does this matter, or how does that make sense? Well, it's because the optimal parameters today or historically might not be optimal tomorrow. If your strategy only works with these exact parameters, It will likely break when the market changes or when you put it on unseen data. But if your strategy works well across a range of parameters, it means it can adapt primarily. So as the market shifts, for example, the strategy still performs because the underlying edge is actually real and you can still optimize those parameter values because you're not tied to particularly just one that has worked historically and you just have that data for it. The lesson here is if your strategy is highly sensitive to exact parameters, you most likely don't have an edge. You most likely have a lucky historical fit, and robust strategies work across a range of reasonable parameters. Now, number 3 is out of sample performance degrades only modestly. Now, I'm going to play a clip from Cliff Asness. He runs one of the biggest kind of quant funds, and he talks about this, how most of their models only perform actually about half as good of their backtests in out of sample / in live markets.
Literally, since our Goldman Sachs days, this is more than 25 years ago, we've generally used half a backtest out of sample as a bogey. And life has worked out fairly close to that. Now, we've built more factors, improved our backtest, so it's not necessarily half of what it used to be, but that's not been far off, and we would consider that a victory. If you have a decent backtest that you don't think is over data mined, that you think is reasonable, that you understand the economic spirit, that you've tested robustly in a whole bunch of places, all of that, still assume half going forward. And half is obviously a rule of thumb. You may sometimes think 2/3, 1/3 makes more sense, but it's good to have a simple thing you don't deviate from.
Now, the reason this is so important, and it's also where most strategies actually fail. First, let me just break down what out of sample actually means. So normally this means you split historical data into 2 parts. You have in sample, so this is the data you're going to be developing and optimizing over. And you have out of sample data. This is the data that your strategy has never seen before. You test on it once really, and it's only after development is complete and you're ready to test out of sample. Primarily, you really only get one shot on this out of sample data. If you test on out of sample, then go back and adjust, and then continuing to go back onto the out of sample data, it's not really out of sample more. You've kind of contaminated it. This is a mistake a lot of traders make, so just make sure not to make it. So why do I say performance degrades out of sample? Shouldn't I be saying that it holds up perfectly out of sample? Well, because in sample is using optimization, so you're inevitably going to get some noise and you're going to get better performance in sample. And this doesn't really even matter how careful you are. Always in sample is going to often be better performance because you have that training happening. You're optimizing over that data. Whereas out of sample performance, right, strips away all that noise and you're showing completely unseen data to that strategy. So the rule of thumb is normally 20 to 40% performance drop. Realistically, that's fine. That's completely acceptable. Now, under 20%, that might get a bit suspicious. It depends on the strategy. You might have a data leak in and out of sample testing, or you maybe have a look-ahead bias. Now, over 50%, that's realistically where your strategy isn't going to work live, and you don't really want to get to 70% performance drop. Now, for you guys to have a couple of checks, a couple of common sources for data leakage, especially when you're doing in and out of sample testing, is using future data in your calculations. So like using the close price to generate a signal that should fire before the close. That's a very common one as a look-ahead bias. Another one is just training on data that actually includes the out of sample period. A lot of people kind of mess that up. And then lastly is accidentally normalizing data using statistics from the entire data set instead of just using the in sample. So that basically means you're optimizing parameters with a bit of information from the out of sample that you shouldn't have had. Now, the lesson here is if your strategy performs nearly as good or even, about 40% give or take as the in sample, you most likely actually have a winner. If you can perform out of sample data, that's a great sign. Now, number 4 is your win rate and risk to reward ratio makes mathematical sense together. What this graph kind of shows is the different winning percentages and then the win-loss ratio of what's needed to be profitable, which is above the line, and then the line itself is actually break even. Below the line is unprofitable. Now, how does this tie in? Well, this is where a lot of traders fool themselves. They optimize for win rate without understanding risk to reward ratio, or they optimize for risk to reward ratio without understanding win rate. And they end up with strategies that look good on paper, but fail completely live. So here's the mathematical relationship between these. For a strategy to be profitable, you want expectancy to be positive, and it must exceed transaction costs as well, of course. So there are 2 valid approaches to be profitable with this. You could have a high win rate and a very small risk to reward. This is often going to be a mean reversion strategy. So you win really quite a lot, but when you lose a lot more. Approach 2 is you have a very low win rate and you have a very large risk to reward. So this is like a trend following strategy, for example. You lose often, maybe even like 50, 60%, but when you win big. Both work, both are profitable. So overall, the actual win ratio and risk to reward ratio don't really matter by themselves. They only matter when they're tied in conjunction. But let's give you an example of what doesn't work. Let's say you have a 35% win rate strategy. Your average win is $100. Your average loss is $150. Overall, that's negative expectancy. You're basically losing money on every trade. Another example is that let's say you had a 90% win rate, right? But you're losing $800 when you lose. You're still going to be losing money over a long enough time horizon because your losses are so big. So here's what you need to understand. Your strategy type determines the natural relationship between win rate and risk to reward ratio. Mean reversion strategies, these are naturally going to have higher win rates, so 60 to 80%, but they're going to have smaller risk to rewards because by function, most of the time they're using a large stop, and that's how they're achieving that higher win rate. So that's normally going to be maybe 0.5 risk to reward to maybe 1 risk to reward. Now, trend following strategies, these are probably going to have a 30 to maybe 50% if you're lucky kind of win rate, and your risk to reward is going to be maybe 1 to 2, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, etc. You're going to have huge outliers in there. Now, this is naturally because you're buying strength and selling weakness. Most of the time, it's going to be a false breakout, and when you catch a real trend, that's when you win big, and that's when you're getting that huge risk to reward. The lesson here is don't try and turn a trend following strategy into a high win rate strategy, and don't try and turn a mean reversion strategy into a high risk to reward strategy. The amount of time I've seen people do this is obscene. Please understand what you're trading and why you're getting that con of that low risk to reward or that high risk to reward or that low win rate or that high win rate. Now, number 5 is the strategy has clear reasoning behind it. This is the sign most traders really completely ignore. They build strategies based on what the numbers show, and they don't actually think about the edge behind it or the reasoning of why it could make money. And that is a very huge mistake. When you backtest, for example, you could just backtest a random combination of indicators until something works. Eventually, by chance, you're going to figure out something historically that has worked and shows, 30% annual returns. But if you can't explain why it works, it often won't work live. And even when people mentioning like data mining and machine learning, you're gonna have to be able, some of the top firms to be able to do that to a scale where it actually works live. Most retail trading methods where you're using machine learning to data mine, you're just going to run into overfitting issues and you're not really gonna get anywhere. But there are 3 main legitimate sources of making money in trading. You've got risk premium harvesting, you've got behavioral bias exploitation, and you've got structural market inefficiencies. 2 and 3 are pretty much just inefficiencies in themselves, but kind of broken down. Now, number 1, I've talked about this a lot on the channel. This is where you're getting paid for taking on risk others want to avoid. Easy example is equity risk premium. Stocks return more than bonds because you're taking volatility risk. Another one is momentum premium. Winners keep on winning because you're taking drawdown risk by buying expensive stocks that can crash very hard. And there's also a part of the behavioral side of things in momentum, but that's also just a part that you're taking on more volatility because you do go through bigger drawdowns with momentum. You also want to think who's on the other side of this trade. For example, investors who want stable, predictable returns, they're often willing to pay you, right, a higher return through those kind of stocks compared to bonds to avoid that volatility. And that's why you're getting that kind of premium. Now, obviously, they're not physically paying you, right? But people wouldn't trade stocks if you're going to get the exact same return as bonds and you're going to have more volatility. It doesn't really make sense as a peer-to-peer transaction, right? You also want to think, why does this edge persist? Most of the time in this case is because risk preferences don't really change. There's always going to be someone that wants safety. There's always going to be someone that wants to harvest that risk premium. Now, number 2 is behavioral bias exploitation. So this is where you're profiting from predictable human psychology. For example, a common one is anchoring bias. Investors anchor to old prices, underreact to new information. Momentum strategies often exploit this. You also have loss aversion. Investors hold losers way too long and sell winners way too soon. So you can have contrarian strategies that exploit this. You can also think who's on the other side of this trade. Most of the time, it's going to be retail traders and emotional investors making more predictable movements. Why does this persist? Well, it's because human psychology doesn't change that often, especially en masse. People will always be loss averse, and these biases are hardwired for the most part. Now, type 3 is a structural inefficiency. So this is where you're exploiting something mechanical of the market. So for example, index rebalancing. When stocks are added to S&P 500 or many indexes, index funds must buy them up, of course, and there's going to be people that are going to front run that with maybe information beforehand or by taking, a prediction of what's going to be added, for example. There's also a very simple example like funding rate arbitrage. This is where perpetual futures in crypto have funding rates and they pay you X amount of interest for taking a leveraged position. And this can create arbitrage opportunities between different exchanges. A quick way I like to think about this is, 1, for every strategy I build, I ask, am I harvesting a risk premium? Am I exploiting something that's a behavioral bias? Am I exploiting something that's more structural as an inefficiency? 2, I do like to think who's on the other side of this trade. And then 3, will this edge persist? Now, not every edge is going to persist, especially structural inefficiencies. If you have an arbitrage one, most of the time when enough volume is pushed through, that arbitrage is going to disappear and you'll have to find another one to replace it. So most likely they won't last. last very long compared to like a risk premium that's going to last a very long time and already has. Overall, you want to start with a hypothesis about why an edge or, a reason you can make money from this strategy exists. Test if the data confirms it. So you want to do hypothesis, test, and then validate. The lesson here is if you can't explain why a strategy works beyond the numbers look good, often this is going to be a very weak reasoning and it's going to be very difficult to see it actually work live. Now, if you want to learn everything about these 5 techniques and also knowledge around backtesting, check out the Backtesting Bootcamp. It has code templates you can learn from as well. It's the first link in the description.